worth it.
Yeah, exactly. Because at least then, I mean, it's kind of like the discussion of how we should live, whether God exists or not. And the conclusion I've come to is that we should live as though there is no God and that there is no judgment, because at least then we would be forced to have to create an objective secular moral system that is based upon what we observe of what our behaviour does to ourselves and each other, and live that way. Because at least then, as the for lack of a better phrase, we win either way. Because if, even as you said, even if this is impossible, we can at least say that if it is actually possible, then we've contributed towards the fruition of that kind of life. And if it is impossible, then at least we haven't capriciously contributed towards the downfall. And as you said towards the end of the because there was a 5-year summary podcast that you did for the Global Show, and one thing that I fucking loved about what you said towards the end is the suggestion of what you're going to have on your tombstone, because I think I want to have that on my tombstone as well. Basically, just the phrase, "At least I fucking tried."
I think it's possibly the only thing you can have on your gravestone. Although I would add that Spike Milligan came up with what is probably a better one, which is, "I told you I was ill."
Yeah. Or you'll never take me alive.
Yeah. Do an exercise for me. I'm going to do this.
Okay.
Write your own obituary. Listeners, do this as well. Sit down and write your own obituary up to now as if you're going to die tomorrow. And see what you are, or rather as if you died yesterday, I should say. And see what you come up with. See how impressive it is. My guess, it's going to be disappointing. And I think it's probably a motivational thing. This has actually happened to a few people. Alfred Nobel, the inventor of dynamite, and the warmongering man that he was in all that way, had his obituary printed because they thought he'd died. It was back in the day where you couldn't ring them up, or there was no internet to check. Oh, he's on Facebook, now he's alive. And he read his own obituary, and his obituary painted him as a warmonger and a dynamite manufacturer, and he changed everything and created the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, as bullshit as the Peace Prize is, that shows you the effect that it has, that kind of forced retrospective.
Yeah.
And it happened to a few other people as well. Marcus Garvey, the Back to Africa movement guy, he actually had an apoplectic fit whilst reading his early obituary. And it even gets as dark. Christopher Hitchens tells this story better than I do, but it gets as dark as the fact that Ernest Hemingway, over morning margaritas, he used to have different things, didn't he? Morning drinks, would read the obituary column to cheer himself up. Which worked for about 10 years before he blew his head off with a shotgun. But, try it tomorrow. See what you're left with. See what your retrospective is. See what your social footprint was. Don't worry. Mine sucks just as much as yours. But it's maybe worth doing once a year. Maybe as a New Year's resolution. Just sit down and write your history. My guess is that you could probably just take last year's one and make a few minor edits, like a poorly maintained CV, which is all the same thing. It might be a useful tool. I might start doing this every now and again just to remind myself of how very little I'm doing, and how much more one should do.
Yeah, I think that's actually that would be an interesting thing to do. I mean, like going back to what we were talking about the cost of activism. I mean, it would be negligent to say that it's just a financial cost that we go through. It's also like an emotional and psychological cost that we pay. I mean, myself. I mean, because I was working so hard on my documentary, because I imposed a deadline of my 30th before my 30th birthday to finish my documentary, because I just said to myself, right, I'm going to finish my first film before I enter my third decade of life. But because of all the stress of the documentary, I started to develop some gastrointestinal problems. So because of the stress and the fact that we that we garner so many attacks from people. It doesn't, I mean, I can't remember which presentation or show you mentioned this on, but you said that it doesn't serve us to be advocates of this movement because there are so many repercussions from the culture and from our own imposed value systems from the culture that sort of like tries to beat us down and say, no, you can't, how dare you do that? How dare you blaspheme against our society? Get back in line, sort of thing. And it's the stress of constantly having to be pulled back and forth because, as you said earlier, we all have our jobs that we do. So it's this constant tug of war. I mean, that definitely has a cost to our emotions and thoughts. But as I said a moment ago, we do this anyway, and understandably we're the ones who get attacked. It's like the society cannot deal with the kind of change that is necessary because of the way that society is currently constructed. That it it wouldn't be a dominant establishment if it wasn't designed to actually inhibit and prohibit change.
Absolutely, well put. It's absolutely true. It wouldn't be the kind of society it is were it not coercive and difficult and almost impossible to live without. Quote. I mean, this actually even affects people who are trying to change the system. You notice they think the same way. What was that wonderful line from Stefan Molyneux when it was asked, if anybody didn't want to participate in essentially Austrian economics or whatever, so well, they can go and live in the forest. In other words, there is no alternative. It's essentially what he was saying. It was, you can go and just have no technology whatsoever and live like essentially an animal.
It's a black or white fallacy, really.
Yeah. Whereas I think actually, if we were to roll out I dare not say the word perfect society or a society that really was a resource-based economy. The practical upshot is that people who do want to be like naturalists, do want to actually live out in the wilderness, would have a wilderness to live in. It would actually be there. Our byproduct would be the environment that could have like smaller societies live really well and live within clean, healthy, supportive, very, very basic primitivist societies. Whatever. Why not have those, man? Are we trying to find every last tribe and get them to live in a fucking house? No. Like, they can just stay there. It doesn't really matter. But if you want that, if you think that that's a valid thing, then you have to support an environmentalist policy on that. Otherwise, they don't have an environment to live in. And will, in fact, be killing everything if we don't reverse it. Just yesterday, I have this somewhere. Let me read it out to you so that the users can find it. It was even academia is now falling on the right side of things, although they've been doing it for a while. It was posted on sfgate.com, and I don't know what sfgate is, by the way, but this was the article is written by Carolyn Lochhead, Lochhead, so there's two H's in there. And it covers Richard Norgard, a UC Berkeley economist, whose leading quote is, there is no theoretical reason why the economy has to keep growing. And it's basically a very, very well shared and very decently written article on the growing economic alumni, if you like, practitioners, who are coming away from the idea of a large an economy that must grow. Because we notice very, very well that, as to quote it directly, actually, a critique of economic growth and its harm to the well-being of humans and the planet. Ecologists warn that the economic growth is strangling the natural systems on which life depends, creating not just wealth, but filth on a planetary scale. So we are indeed creating wealth. We're creating anti-wealth as well. And the big question comes, how do we counteract this, apart from just the activism, the awareness spreading, which has to happen either way. I think there's going to be a form of counter-corruption, if one may use that phrase, where we break some of the ways that the society works upon its folk to inject these ideas in a very direct way. I mean, Anonymous, the opposite of Amazon, they do this all the time by literally hacking the websites of, ridiculous government bodies that are infringing on your freedoms, or taking PayPal down when they decide to create a financial blockade for WikiLeaks completely extrajudicially and completely illegally. And it'll be the people who write on money, you are free. Well, you just wrote it on a medium of exchange that by definition should not be destroyed by the people who own it, so they are forced to carry your message. All of this kind of stuff is important. There are many, many other ways, like we come back to boycott and things like that. It's going to be the sort of systemic counter-corruption that we have to do.
So, I mean, when thinking back on this whole interview, what would you say are the things that you want the listener to come away with? What would you want people to take from this conversation?
Well, let's think back. I'll do them in order. I think that people should look into the way that architecture affects buying patterns. I think that is the first step, immunizing yourself on yet another level from what is essentially subliminal advertising through structure. I would like them to write their own obituary and consider that their brief lives should be well spent, as mine is not at the moment. I still have to spend it well as well. I'm not saying that you should be like me or anything like that. But to ground yourself in your mortality and realize that you have a limited amount of time and you want to look back on it well. You want to look back on it with some pride. Definitely that. And I think people should also consider the narratives we were talking about, the idea of using perhaps structures of invasive diseases to understand the way that a system can work apparently to the benefit of the social body, but in fact to its detriment, and to start immunizing themselves mentally against that as well, and to look up and read and watch everything that Mark Passio does.
Yeah, because I remember there was an interview sometime last year. I think it was like in August last year, I think, and he was on another radio show because he got detained while giving out leaflets in I think it was Liberty Square.
No irony there.
Yeah, brilliant irony. But yeah, he was on there talking about that sort of thing and talking about how our civil liberties are being encroached upon. And I remember he actually he plugged his radio show and said, I recommend for any of my listeners who want to listen to my podcast, start from the very beginning. And I didn't know how long he'd been doing the radio show for, and each of his radio shows are 2 hours long, so they're very comprehensive. And I think he's up to about 200 now. So I'm currently at 36. So
I've so catching up to do, man. I've only listened to the natural law seminar, not even all of it.
Well, to be completely fair, his natural laws, from what I've watched so far, I've watched nearly all of the morning seminar.
Okay.
That is that whole seminar thing is really it's like a condensed version of a lot of what he talks about on his podcast show, really. So really it's just to
to wrap it up.
Yeah.
I mean, look, take this away from the interview. Despite all of the slow stresses and detriment and difficulties of modern life, and the inherited slow, painful cultural baggage, and the seemingly endless problems. I mean, at the moment we're being battered with all kinds of weather that are the product of living outside of our means and all the rest of it. Take all that in, but don't let it get you down. Because it's almost a tool for the final dying death spiral of a society, that all of the difficulties collapse in on the psyche and you end up doing nothing. You are a phenomenally powerful person. If you have a voice or you even have fingers to type with, you are able to communicate, which almost nothing on this planet can do via language the way that we do. This is extremely powerful stuff. And you should take pride in the fact that you're alive. As Richard Dawkins put it beautifully once, he said, We are going to die, and that makes us the lucky ones because most people will never be born. And that is true. You are, as Justine Garda puts it in the wonderful book, The Solitaire Mystery, life is a lottery in which only the winners appear. You are one of billions that could have existed that didn't, if we just count the sperm. If we then count all the people who would have been born but weren't because one of the parents died or one of the grandparents died or great-grandparents, and that exponentially increases, you survived the Black Plague. Thousands and thousands and thousands of your ancestors had to survive the Black Plague in order for just you to be born. It's an inverted version. People always think of population working the other way. Oh, it'll be me, and then there'll be 2 kids, and there'll be 4 grandkids. Yeah, but you are the product of exactly the opposite on the way here. Let me empower you. Read those books if you like. They're only fictional books, but they're very, very good. Get inside what that means and realize that that alone should give you hope. The fact that you are even here to affect some kind of change, to do any kind of learning, to reach out to any other human being who's also a lottery winner in life. Imagine, if you will, and I do this sometimes, and it's going to make me sound crazy, I imagine sometimes that in the afterlife, you form the particles of a tree. And let's just say that part of that tree, you're able to view the world from the viewpoint of the tree, but you don't have language. You can't really move other than just growing and dying. And you have to watch in sullen, desperate silence as the planet gets destroyed and as suffering increases and as all these difficulties happen. What if that is the afterlife? Does that motivate you in any way to affect things while you are a mobile, communicative being? Take that with you, let it empower you, and go out and change the world.
Yeah, because that's the scenario that you painted out. That is what a lot of Buddhist traditions would describe as an unfortunate rebirth. The idea that because my mother's a devout Buddhist, and we have a lot of very very detailed and profound discussions about morality and the course of humanity and all that sort of thing, and the idea that we as human beings, I can kind of see where they're coming from when they say that to be reborn as a human being is a fortunate rebirth, because as human beings we have all this ability to affect our environment that, very much like the tree that you explained, cannot. And it does lend itself to what Peter Joseph said about, because this is one thing that kind of initially it sort of sent me in a bit of a spin when he said that whether you like it or not, we're all in the Zeitgeist movement.
Yeah,
you
you form part of the Zeitgeist. You form part of the dominant culture, and for that very reason, you're able to affect it.
Yeah. So I guess since we've been chundering on for quite a long time now, I guess we'll start closing this out. But but just before we go, is there anything that you would want the audience to check out or know about, like anything that's coming up in 2014 that you want people to be geared for or aware about?
Yes, actually, we have a few different things. Of course, in March, we'll be having Zeitgeist Day in London and around the world. If there's not one near you, make one. You can do it. Is that I'm speaking at Anticipating 2025 the weekend after Zeitgeist Day as well. I'll give it away now. It's going to be the same presentation. I just don't have it in me to do 2 different presentations.
Yeah.
It'll be on actually what we've sort of been talking about, hacking culture lag, being able to get around the slow evolution of our traditions and values, and speeding up the necessary arrival of our truly sustainable values. Do that. Let's see what else in 2014. There are a lot of at the moment. If you're in the London chapter, or if you're in London anyway, and you're interested in this, and there has been an influx in the last couple of weeks. I've noticed of people asking me how they can get involved. They've never really been to anything before. If you're in London, the meetup group, the London Zeitgeist meetup group, you can Google it and find it. Join that, and they post everything on there. Go and join it. Our radio shows are kicking off again this week. I took a 2-week break because I just couldn't do it. I had to.
Yeah, obviously.
Christmas period. But that'll be kicking up again. We've got some good stuff coming up. There'll be that. And watch out for more films and for more public presentations. And, of course, the much-awaited orientation guide, which is now very nearly complete at some several hundred pages. If you really don't understand anything we've been talking about and think it's been too vague, or what are these people even about, start with that, and it starts from the very basics of economic theory as it has progressed, all the way through to modern technology and social values, violence, imprisonment, public health. Everything is in there. And that will give you the kind of grounding that you wish you'd had if I've not communicated correctly today. I would say that those are the things you should take away. Definitely, those are the kinds of things that you can do now to educate yourself well. And you know what? We footnoted and sourced everything in there. So guess what? You have a bunch of extra stuff as a bibliography to go and read as well. Don't rely on the films. Don't rely on Zeitgeist because they are filmic expressions of underlying research. Go for the research. The films are great. They changed my life. They made me go and do the research. You can even skip it and just go straight for the research, or use the films as a grounding for your research to see what's true and what isn't. See what you agree with. See what you can find. Maybe you can better it. Maybe you can find newer, more exact sources. That is not just possible; it's mandatory, because that's the definition of our wonderful scientific matter. And if you can, get a basic grounding in science. I didn't, unfortunately, have one because I studied English literature at university, which means I'm qualified to speak and have a conversation. That's about it. But if you want to, I can recommend one final book, which is Bill Bryson's A Brief History of Nearly Everything, which covers all of life on Earth in about 400 pages.
But then again, having said that, I mean, one of the things that I tell people is that even a baby understands the scientific method, because if it isn't for the scientific method, how the hell do they learn how to walk? So yeah, so basically that's unfortunately the end of the show. I mean, I know we could probably go on for a fair few more hours, but I dare say there are some people going, come on, wrap it up. But but anyway, just the usual announcements. This podcast has been brought to you by Facepalm. If you go to www.rbfacepalm.com and enter the code name Adam, you can get 15% off your very own transmitter. So let's see if we can aim for those goals of 1 million facepalms to maybe see David Cameron get grabbed out of Question Time, taken round to an abandoned hospital and tickled for 10 hours, because I would pay to watch that. Anyway, thank you very much for clicking in, as it were, guys, and thank you very much, Ben, for coming on. For those of you who aren't aware, Ben has actually spent more time on this podcast show than any of my other guests. So, yeah, there hasn't. I'm the only person who has spent as much more time on this podcast show. But that being said, thanks very much for coming on, Ben. And as for the next podcast, which will be the March 5th episode, I'm very pleased to announce that I'm going to be having Thomas Anderson on. For those of you on Facebook, you'll know him as the brilliant guy from Austria, who's made quite a few really interesting videos about a resource-based economic model, and pushing back against ANCAP dogma. But that will be that show, and I'll be looking forward to that. I'm not entirely sure what we're going to be talking about, but I'm sure we're going to figure something out. So it's a goodbye from me, guys, and say goodbye, Ben.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me, Adam, and thank you, dear listener, for listening this far in. Thank you.